fine. Okay, so we are Perek Lamed Gimel. I'll tell you where we're going to start from. I just want to give a quick review from last week. It's the middle of page Mem Beis, and it says V'hinei k'sheyamik b'zeh harvei. About 2/3 down, towards the end of the line. V'hinei k'sheyamik. Sorry?
In the English page? This one?
Oh, yeah, no, it's not the English page because every 2 pages is the Hebrew. It's Mem Beit, which means it would be 83, but it doesn't say 83. And then about 2/3 down the page, with a dot, there's a dot there, and it says V'hinei k'sheyamik b'zeh harvei. Okay. You see with us, yeah? You got it?
Yes.
So, we did a review last week about what happens till Perek Lamed Beis, where the Alter Rebbe talks about being B'simcha, and he talks about how you have to put down the Nefesh Habamis. And then he says, but really that shouldn't bring to sadness because when you understand that the true, even though our conscious identity is our Nefesh Habamis, but when you understand our true identity, which is the Neshama, you have a lot of Simcha, and then you make the Neshama the main thing, and you understand the insignificance of the body, then you're able to do that and achieve Simcha. And then he goes into Perek Lamed Beis, which is the Perek of Avas Yisrael, which explains that when you give primary importance to the Neshama over the body, it's then possible to reach Avas Yisrael. Don't run. It's then possible to reach the idea of Avas Yisrael because as far as the Neshama is concerned, we're all the same and the differences are only in the body. Now, that was until Perek Lamed Beis. Then we started last week Perek Lamed Gimel. Perek Lamed Gimel, the Alter Rebbe, if you want to follow this there, but you don't have to, that's okay. Perek Lamed Gimel, the Alter Rebbe gives an additional strategy to achieve Simcha. Okay? And this is, we're going to talk about it today more because it's actually quite a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a hard Perek, not so intellectually it is intellectually hard also, but actually it's going to be interesting. We have to really think about this because it develops a strategy for Simcha here which is completely contrary to what people normally think. And that's the Chiddush of the Alter Rebbe really here. We'll get to it. Because essentially, normally people understand Simcha, the more I feel better, the more Simcha I can be. And the more I feel present, the more Simcha I'll be. We're going to learn the exact opposite actually, which we'll understand. But it takes a lot of... We live in a world, I guess that's what I'm getting at. We live in a world where we really have to think about this to understand it. Okay, we'll get there. Now, so the Alter Rebbe gave the introduction last week. He says, first of all, I have to remind you, says the Alter Rebbe, we have to go back to the principle of the oneness of Hashem, Achdus Hashem, which is really the principle behind all the Chassidus, according to the Mittel Rebbe. In many places we find this. The Alter Rebbe, that's what he came really to emphasize. Obviously the purpose was to serve Hashem better, but it was to fulfill the mitzvah of Hashem Echad, the oneness of Hashem, according to the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, right? And essentially, the Alter Rebbe's innovation or Chidush or the Baal Shem Tov was that Hashem Echad doesn't mean one God, it doesn't mean source of all everything, it doesn't mean an indivisible God, it means the only existence, really, right? And we went through this whole idea that really the world is, first of all, cannot independently exist without Hashem's creative energy, as explains later in Shar Yichud V'Amunah. Every single moment Hashem is making the world exist. If that spark of Hashem were to go away, the world would return to a state of nothingness as it was before the 6 days of creation. Then we talked about the idea of the world is bottled, therefore the world is actually not really its own independent existence altogether, although it seems to us as it is, which is by design, through the process that we call Tzimtzum, and Alter Rebbe explains this in Shara Yichud V'Amunah, but really the world is completely bottled. I don't know how to say the word bottle in English properly, but anyway, it's bottled, right? To Hashem, not only like the rays of the sun to the sun, which of course even the rays that we see is bottled to the sun because it's so insignificant compared to the sun, and if you block the sun, the rays disappear, right? But it's much more than that. It's like the rays inside the sun, right? That's what the Alter Rebbe says in Shar Yichud V'Amunah, and which means it's doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but it means its entire existence is the sun. gave you the mashal last week of the Din Torah, the two judges, the Pascha and the Shaila, and they're talking about lots of money, which there's litigation of. To the litigants, it's a significant thing. It's money. To them, it's not money. To them, it's just a part of the ruling. It's part of the Torah. That's all it is. That $500 is just part of the Torah. It's a manifestation of the Torah. Same thing. In this, the Alter Rebbe says in Sharech al-Munah that if the rays come out of the sun, it must be in the sun as well. The difference is that outside the sun, at the end of the day, they look as if they're something different, or they are something different. Whereas inside the sun, they must be there, but their whole existence is it's just the perfection of the sun. But he also has rays, but it's just part of the sun. It's indistinguishable from the sun itself. So to the world is really bottled, which means everything really is just a manifestation of Hashem. Right? Easy to say in 10 minutes, of course, hard to internalize. Okay, but that's the point. And that's really so much about Chassidus, that the world as an independent being is completely nonsense. It's nothing. It's just through Tzimtzum. Of course, it exists. It exists because we know that. There's Torah mitzvahs and Hashem created the world. But in truth, its existence is really just really like this rays within the sun, and it's totally bottled. It's really only part of Hashem's existence, really. Yeah? Okay. What's that got to do with Simcha? So he says like this. Yeah. BINA. I'm using a Tanya today with commentaries because it just brought out some nice things and I wanted to make sure I got it right. So, BINA says, but every word in Tanya is very thought out. Now, here also we see it actually this prayer very much so. There's a lot of nuances here in the wording, so we'll try and tap into that. When you go very deeply into this idea, in other words, you deeply contemplate this concept of the oneness of Hashem, what will happen? Yismach liboy, your heart will become happy. V'sogel nafshe, and your soul will become glad. And then he quotes a pasuk, af gilas verane, like a really celebratory sort of happiness. And it will happen b'chol leiv v'nefesh u'ma'od. It will happen in your whole heart and your whole soul, very much, using the same words as b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshcha, b'chol meidech. In other words, this happiness will permeate, it will take you through, it will go through and through and permeate your entire being. Be'emunah zu, with this faith. Now, why? Ki rabohi. He says, this faith is rabbo, it's great. In other words, it's an unbelievable faith. Why is it an unbelievable faith? Ki kirvas elokim mamash. Because what it is, when you understand this concept and you contemplate it really, really deeply, it's the ultimate closeness with Hashem. Okay, now use the pasuk. You mean just generally Hashem, right? Right, God, in other words. I don't know why I use it in Kin. That's a good point, but it means just is an unbelievable closeness with Hashem. Now, there's a lot going on here, even in this couple of lines, which we'll extrapolate later. But let's just try and break it down a little bit. First of all, the Alter Rebbe refers to this concept as emunah, as a faith. Why? Why is it emunah? It's very well explained in Tanya. It's actually, like in Sharech al-Munah, he brings proofs that it has to be like that, because the world couldn't exist without Hashem's creative power. Therefore, it was independent existence. Like I told you last week, the bird is flying, but the stone is flying, but it's not a flying stone, right? All those things that we spoke about last week, they make sense. They're logical. I mean, they're hard to understand. They may be hard to relate to, but do you really need a munah for this, right? And the answer is yes, you do, and he calls it a munah for that reason. Where we get the munah from, we'll talk about it soon, but you actually need a munah, because at the end of the day, with all of the logical explanations, right, it goes against the very existence as we know it, as we see it. Right? This world is what we call the world. It's lowest world. What does lowest world mean? Not in geography. It means it's the world that conceals Hashem completely. So to us, really, unless you understand it, unless you learn about it, unless you saw it at Matan Torah, the world is a separate existence. The chair is a chair, the table is a table. My tastes and my different tastes and your different to your tastes, and they're real and they right. We're pretty here as an independent existence. Hashem is completely hidden here, right? So it's a little bit like if you were standing somewhere in the middle of the day and it's midday and it's very bright, right? And someone comes up to you and he really proves it to you that it's night and not day. But it's not, it's day. I mean, proofs are very good and everything, it's day, right? Unless it's built on emunah. So in other words, the belief that we have, Alter Rebbe's thesis in Tanya, based on the Baal Shem Tov, of what the oneness of Hashem actually means, starts with the emunah. Starts with the emunah. The emunah was from Avraham Avinu, the emunah was a scene, the clarity of that was in Matan Torah, and there's a relation of Sinai, but Matan Torah was only a transient existence, a transient experience. Okay? Matan Torah, they didn't experience this, because that's why it says, the Rebbe has a whole sikha about the pasuk that says that the nation saw the voices, the thunder. Did I say it before? I'm sure at some point I did. Right? So just very quickly to revise it. They saw thunder. What does it mean? Rashi says that there was a miracle in Matan Torah. They saw what was normally heard. They heard what was normally seen. And the Rebbe says, what do you mean? The Ran says, Hashem doesn't make miracles for nothing. It's just a stunt. I mean, what to see light, to hear lightning and see thunder. I mean, what's that all? So he explains, because no, there was the essence of Matan Torah, because when you see something, there's absolute clarity. When you hear something, it makes sense, but there's no clarity. Like I said, it's not beyond the doubt. Even if I prove to you in the next room there's a table, you might believe me, but you know at the end of the day, it's not 100% certain because you haven't seen it. So this world for us normally is, the world is something we see, Hashem is something we hear. Even if it's Achdas Hashem, even if it's Oneness Hashem, we hear it. Right? Matan Torah was the other way around. Matan Torah, they saw something which is normally heard. In other words, they saw godliness, they saw oneness in Hashem, and they heard, the world became something you hear about. Like it doesn't, right? They say about, I think, the Mittler Rebbe, that's Samach Tzedek, I don't know which one, that he learned a Maimer, he learned Chassidus, and he heard Mamorim from his father, his grandfather, whatever it was, and he became so clear with the idea of Achdus Hashem that the Alter Rebbe, I think, or the Mittler Rebbe, something like that, had to say a bunch of Mamorim to him to prove there actually is a world. But he got to the point, there's no world, finished. But it says in the Torah, Hashem created, right? Just the world is bottled, but because he got to that point, but it became clear, right? Now, so really, as much as you learn about it, and as much as seichel you have about it, and as much as it's explained in Chassidus in depth, and you learn all the Mamorim about it, at the end of the day, for regular people like us, you still need a emunah. Because at the end of the day, it's still like standing under the bright sun in midday and someone telling me it's light. It's night. Why do I believe it? And why do I try to understand it? Because I have a emunah. Because then a emunah we have deep down on the neshama is like the certainty, is like the clarity that he didn't have in Matan Torah. Same sort of idea, right? However, having the emunah is not enough. Because having the emunah, we'll soon see what the simcha is here exactly, but having emunah won't bring you simcha. That's why he says before, K'sheyamik bozeh harbe. When you deeply contemplate in this, when you really understand it, not just learn about it and get it, but you deeply take that emunah and you bring it down into unbelievable understanding, and again and again and again to the point that it becomes mamash who you are, and you become clear on this concept based on the emunah, but also it becomes the oimek, the depth of it is because you are thinking about it a lot and using the seichel and bringing it into your intellect and into your heart, which is really the whole point of Tanya, right? You'll develop an unbelievable simcha. What's the simcha? Simcha is how close we are to Hashem. Right? We all know that we are nothing. We all know we're not so great, for sure not. We all know we have failings. And yet, we contemplate and we believe and we become clear in Achdus Hashem, so that means Hashem is mamash with me. I'm part of Hashem. unbelievable simcha. And he extrapolates on that, right? And like I said, he brings over here a little bit, right? This idea that it's not just emunah, it's not just learning about it, it's deeply thinking about it. So you really, really attached to the concept. Why is all these stages so necessary? Because it's not who we are. By default. By default, we're very here as an independent existence. So it takes a lot of layers to actually really come to terms with this concept. Right? I mean, it's easy to say this concept, we say it, but to really believe that we're completely bottled, we're like the rays in the sun.
Can you explain bottle a bit further?
Bottle means we have no independent entity. We're just completely nullified to Hashem. In other words, we're part of Hashem's existence. We don't exist in the way we think we exist. We exist, but we're not, right? By the way, of course we exist, and even the tzimtzum that Hashem does, and later on the Rabbi has a whole sikha explaining a chapter on Sharich B'Munah. Obviously when Hashem created the tzimtzum, and therefore on one level the way we see it, we see an independent existence, right? Our perspective is not untrue, because the tzimtzum is also Hashem godly created, right? Why am I saying that? Because otherwise no point in Torah mitzvahs. In other words, it's not an illusion. Not only isn't the world an illusion, even the tzimtzum isn't an illusion. The tzimtzum is a real thing Hashem created that from our perspective, we should see it as something separate. Which is why we have to do mitzvahs, to refine the world, to break it, to break the klippah, to break the concealment, to elevate it, until we reveal the real truth. But there is a real truth. Notwithstanding there's a world and we see it a certain way, and Hashem created it that way, designed it that way, and therefore it's a divine design, but it's not the real truth. The real truth is that the world is nothing compared to Hashem. The world as an existence, as an independent existence. Right?
Why is it to be so difficult?
What's that?
Why does it have to be so difficult?
Why shouldn't it be difficult?
Why does it have to be so difficult?
Because that's all we'll see in a second. Because Hashem wanted to do it with we'll get there. But it is very difficult, right? Now, as I said before, and he says, so what's the simcha then? The simcha is the closest of Hashem. That Hashem is mamish. Hashem is not a distant concept. Hashem is my whole existence. My existence is really a manifestation of Hashem. Right? Now, like I said, that's what I said before, this is actually a huge chiddush. Because it's very hard for the concept of bittul is a very difficult thing for people to come to terms with. And often when they do come to terms with it, it's like, seems to them like a horrible concept. Okay, if that's what Torah says, but like, you're diluting me. You're dissolving me. Right? Especially nowadays, where the me is so important, like everyone. Right? And yet, the Alter Rebbe says here, it brings the greatest simcha. Why? No, so I understand the default position, I understand, because why would you want to lose yourself? Right? People normally want to feel themselves to be happy. They want to feel their metzius, they want to feel their existence to be happy. Right? And here the Alter Rebbe says, no. Happiness comes when you lose your metzius. You lose your whole existence. That brings the ultimate bittul. Why? Because losing your metzius means you're in nothing. That's how people look at it like that normally, right? People look at bittul negatively because it's like a dirty word almost sometimes, bittul nowadays. But right? But people look at bittul as because it means you're telling me I'm nothing. Alter Rebbe is not saying you're nothing. He's saying you're nothing what you think you are. You're actually part of something completely, infinitely greater. And also, it doesn't mean that you don't count. Because you are a creation of Hashem, and Hashem created you with certain talents and with certain skill sets and with certain personalities, and they're all important, just not as an independent thing.
And he's sustaining you every second.
Sorry?
And he's sustaining you every
Yeah. But you're not an independent thing. Your uniqueness and your sameness and your specialness and your personality, they're all nothing in terms of being independent. But they're all a manifestation of Hashem. They're divine. So what do I want to go with more? You want to go with me being myself? I want to go solo? Or do I want to be one with Hashem the whole time? Again, we have to change our thinking. The real simcha is when I'm nothing, because I'm part of Hashem. Again, nothing doesn't mean I don't count. On the contrary, if you're part of Hashem, you really count, right? Because you're now part of the true entity. You saw this with older Chassidim, by the way. I'm going to come back to it in a minute as well, because it's so relevant. You saw how simcha and bittul goes together. Again, I always come back to a mental futafas, because I never met a happier chassid, right? And they're all happy, but he was happy even though he'd gone through everything in his life, the worst. And he was happy. Not only was he happy, also he never took himself seriously. If someone would give him covered, he would be very upset. If someone would tell him that he's a very special guy, he'd say, well, me? Nothing. Chassidim put themselves down a lot, and they were very happy. Which again, is counterintuitive. We think if you beat yourself up, you're going to be depressed, right? Yeah, it depends how you beat yourself up. There was a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, I think I told you this in the beginning of Tanya. He should say about himself that, there's different madregas in Tanya. There's a tzaddik, a perfect tzaddik, imperfect tzaddik, a benyani, Rasha of a toivloi, Rasha of a rale. What's the lowest madrega? A Rasha that's completely bad, right? So he had to say, he said, I'm not even a Rasha of a rale. Why? Because it's a madrega that's mentioned in Tanya. I probably don't have anything to do with it. It's like beyond me. Even a Rasha of a rale. Do you think it made him depressed? Not at all. Why? Because remember, I saw it myself. I saw videos of him talking. How he never made a tzimus of himself. He just this bittle. And he was totally happy because he knew that it doesn't make a difference if he's nothing or not. He's part of the Eibishter. The Eibishter's with him in his nothingness, in his failings, and everything that he has. The Eibishter's with him because why? Because he understood Achtas Hashem. He understood the oneness of Hashem. He understood bittul. Actually, it's not Chassidus. It's actually a pasuk. But there's a pasuk. I forgot exactly the wording, but the pasuk compares simcha to humility. Arrogant people are not happy, by the way. Generally speaking, they claim they're happy. They're confident, maybe. They're egocentric. They're horrible sometimes, right? But they're not happy. They're always upset with someone because they puncture the ego. It's like Homer. Maybe they got wealth. Maybe they got stuff done. Maybe they're ambitious. Maybe they've accomplished things. Maybe, but that's pleasure. That's not happiness. Real happiness can only come from bittul. About being part of the true entity, the true existence, the true meaning, the true purpose of life. Achdas Hashem, right? Right? So now he says like this. Sorry? I can't remember exactly. I think Anovim v'yismocha or something about being humble and then being happy. Something like I don't remember the exact wording. Okay. And then he says like this. So you ask, why is it so hard? In other words, why does Hashem have to hide it then? Right? And he says that's the point. Why? Because he continues with the famous expression. He says, actually, this is the purpose, and this is the whole purpose. This is the whole man and the purpose of his existence or creation. And the purpose of the creation of all the worlds. Elyonim v'tachtoinim, upper worlds and lower worlds. What's the purpose? Liyois loy dira zu b'tachtoinim. For Hashem to have a dwelling place here in the lower worlds, in the tachtoinim. As we'll explain later, a great length in Alter. There's a whole chapter later about this, right? But what does that mean essentially? So we know tachtoinim means low. Low means madrega. Low means where Hashem is not obvious, where Hashem is concealed. The more Hashem is concealed, the more low it is, right? That's what lower means. The more opposite of kedusha. For whatever reason, Hashem wanted, He desired to dwell, to be revealed, to be felt, there should be consciousness of Him. Where? In Tachtoinim, in the lower world. Or the way the Chassidus has the expression elsewhere is Tachtoin she'ein Tachtoin lemato himenu. That it should be in a lower place, that there's nothing lower. Right? We are the end of the journey, this world. Can't go lower than this world. Hashem is totally hidden in this world. We're in this world, number one. We're in Golus, number two. We're in Ikvus of the Mashiach, which means before Mashiach comes, where it's the darkest. That's it. We are the purpose of creation because we're so dark, because the world is so dark. Now, when I can work hard, this is the point. When I can work hard, and I can understand, and I can really internalize the idea of Achdus Hashem to the point that it brings me joy because I feel it. I feel Hashem part of me, or I feel that I'm part of Hashem. Whatever word you want to use, right? That's the Rebbe Tachtoinim. Then I've brought the consciousness of Hashem into the Tachtoinim. Right? You see, part of it is you've got to understand, this is also, I think we've talked about this many times, because there's a bit of confusion nowadays about this. It doesn't mean that Tachtoinim have importance. The Tachtoinim, this world is the purpose of creation. It's not an important world unless you bring oneness of Hashem into it, correct? This world is actually the biggest clipper, right? Now, this world is the purpose of creation. In fact, Atzilus, Bri, Tzir, Asir, was all created for this world. It's all to get to this world, right? But the way you have to do it, first you have to understand the bittul of this world, right? First you have to understand this world is actually nothing. Which is why in the tradition of Chassidus, there was a huge emphasis on being mavatel the world and not being worldly as much as possible, and not kochen zach, I don't know how to do that in English, but not being obsessed with world, materialism, worldliness. Why? Because worldliness, materialism on its own is just a concealment of Hashem, that's what it is. Personal pleasure, temptation, all these things. But then when you get to that, then you understand, but hold on, so then what is the existence then? If the world is bottle and the world is nonsense and like Chassidim, all expressions that Chassidim always used to use, right? They used to hate Weltishkeit in Yiddish, they call it. Worldliness. They were like allergic to worldliness, right? But I once told a story. I'm not saying this is a recommended practice for people, but because especially nowadays, you have to be in the world and you have to, not be obsessed with worldliness, but we have to bring Hashem into the world and relate to people. There was a very, very big chassid in Lubavitch that he didn't care about Gashmius at all. I'm not saying this is a recommended practice, but we have to have it in our head at least. We have to understand the perspective. But he just, Gashmius didn't play a role with him at all. Just couldn't care less. And also he dressed like that. And also like he didn't always look the part, like he looked like a schlump. I didn't care. One day he went to Moscow because there was some issue with the government, with the Yidden, and he went to try and do this. And in Moscow there was a businessman, a chassid, a businessman who lived in Moscow, also a big chassid, but he was more a businessman, a more balabatish guy. He was kind of, the chassid's name was Rabbi Bliner, I think his name was. He came from Lubavitch. I've forgotten who the other guy was. The Rebbe told a story once about Fabring, and everyone was laughing. And they were taking a walk, this chassid. Other chassid obviously was more dressed like a businessman. He was, he had to deal with people. And he was a bit embarrassed, like this guy, like his jacket was buttoned all wrong, whatever. So in the middle of the walk, he tells him, Reb Chol, he said, maybe, I know in the Lubavitch, okay, but over here, maybe you want to look a comment kind of thing, right? So he looked at him like so surprised. He says, "I was the licks." He says, where's your head? Like this is where your head is. Like someone looks, someone doesn't look. Okay, it's big madrega, I was saying, but But those are the stories Chassidim used to tell, or Chassidim used to live, or whatever the case. Why? Nowadays, a little bit different. Nowadays, we do put more emphasis in the world because we've got to bring Hashem into the world. This is the crunch time now. We've got to bring Mashiach, right? This is what the Rebbe says. The seventh generation is bringing the Shekhinah into the world, right? But you only do that if you first understand the world is actually taka nothing. He was right. He was right. It just depends on what context, depends how you're doing it, depends on what reason you're doing it, right?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
What do you think it means to like practically live with that, like in a normal way, not like an extreme way?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's a question on the whole Chassidus, actually. How do we apply Chassidus, right? No, so the first thing is we have to have the right hashkafa. At least get it right in our head. The problem that exists often is that people know that they learn about a certain level of living. They know they can't live like that, so they reinterpret the material. That happens a lot today. And that's just intellectually dishonest, right? Because it's not, you're not meant to. No one's expecting us to be a BINA of Tanya, even though the Rabbi says that should be the aspiration, right? But in each person in their journey has to have the. That's what we learn first. Chabad means to learn, right? We learn, we develop hashkafa, we develop the truth in our mind, at least, right? That's the starting point. The starting point is, what do we believe? The fact that I'm not there yet, or maybe we'll never be there, that doesn't matter, right? I need to know what the truth is and not to fool myself. Right? The Mittler Rebbe once said, you can't fool anyone, he says. You can't, he said a very sharp lashon. He once said, he says, you can't fool Hashem, you can't fool anyone else. The only person you can fool is yourself. He says, no, a big deal for a fool to fool themselves. Okay, that's what he said, right? So, how's that? We have to develop a what's the perspective? What's the perspective of Chassidus Chabad, essentially, right? Now, when you develop a perspective and you learn about it and you internalize it as much as you possibly can, we learn this Tanya and so on and so forth. It has to eventually not just be a perspective; it has to eventually make a dent in the way we live, right? But each person, according to their own journey, their own level, right? So yeah, I mean, there is a concept where a person has to try and place more important. In other words, the concept is to make God our whole life. Now, does that mean we're going to be like the Chassid Rabbi, which doesn't care what the surroundings look like, it doesn't care anything like that? No, but we have to know what are our priorities. Where's our focus? Right? Are we trying to emulate the world? Are we trying to be part of the world society? Which if you learn the Friedrich Rebbe's Amorim, you learn Chassidus, you see that's like a silly pursuit because it's nothing. Right? The Friedrich Rebbe talks about Hanochas Ha'olam. Hanochas Ha'olam means worldly etiquette. He talks about. He makes a lot of fun of worldly etiquette. Doing something because that's what society says you should do. Right? Chassidim or Chassidus always have the perspective, no, we don't do things because that's what society do, because the world is essentially nothing. We slowly develop a dent, we make a dent to be a little bit less materialistic, a little bit less emphasis on worldliness, a little bit less focused on what the next door neighbor is going to say, or what I want because of my temptations, right? And to make ourselves more godly, to break ourselves a little bit more, to go beyond, to take one step beyond our comfort zone, because that's what Hashem wants, because we're really part of Him, and we have to have the simcha to develop a bit more bittul that we had till now. Is it going to be the way the Alter says? Yeah, of course not. But that's the idea. The idea is to have that perspective and then work on taking a baby step towards that perspective. Right? What does it mean practically today? So I think it's actually very well. We'll see soon that first of all, it makes a practical difference to our way we keep mitzvahs, which we'll see in a second, right? But also, we have to look what's going on and know that how wrong it is. Like there is, even in very frum communities, there's a very big epidemic today of materialism. Materialism. You just have to look at a magazine, a frum magazine, and see the advertising, right?
Less so in Sydney.
Less so in Sydney, correct. Less so in Sydney, that's right. So we have our own materialism, a different form. Okay, but you're right. No, but it will come here. We're just behind. That's all, right?
No, but people can't afford to live here, so it has
Yeah,
to
yeah,
be
that's true.
something.
See, okay. People are making money, Baruch Hashem, and all Yidden should have parnasa, they should be comfortable, and it's a very good thing. But you also have to know what to do with that, right? I mean, the way people are making simchas, the way people are making brisses, I mean, it's just ridiculous. Someone told me lately they're upsharing. No, not upshare. Was it? Yeah. I just got to think. There's a person who has a business that they go around helping girls make bas mitzvah something. They make a levidik. That's a profession, right? This woman charges like I don't know, like $10,000 or something. That's just this person, right? And I'm sure it's amazing, but that's the chinuch you want to give your child. That's what you want to grow up. That's right. I mean, what's wrong with this? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not what it's about. It's about bringing the Eibush into the world. It's not about becoming worldly, right? Yeah. Of course, a person has what they need. A person has to look like a man. We have to have a decent, comfortable surroundings. All these things, right? And then there's also about priorities. About what do we do? Like, when we want to be, like, we have a choice to be more worldly, but that might compromise on Shulchan Aruch. Or we're going to keep what Hashem wants to do, even though it's hard, and even though it means being a little bit less worldly, right? So that's a choice. So we can all work on those things. Now, you work on them better if you learn this. In other words, we mustn't be afraid. I think this is the point. We mustn't be afraid of entering into these very, very high things, because that's actually the way Chassidus works. The Rebbe would always say, when he told stories, even of Rebbes, right? The Rebbe would always say, first of all, there's a word, before we get to that, there's a word that when you learn things that are beyond you, it's good. You're entering in a new world, you're entering into Hashem's world, a godly world. Just that in itself is a good thing already. Rabbi learning Chassidus. But then, there is a way to relate it to you on your level, in your journey. The Rebbe would say it even, it was very bechiddush actually, the Rebbe would say it even with regard to stories about the Rebbes. So for example, the Rebbe, I'll give you an example. The Rebbe said once, told the story, it's a famous story about the Alter Rebbe who had a guest. And in the Alter Rebbe's home, there was a thing that really, the Alter Rebbe's daughter used to do the cooking, and she would like, and then the guest came, so the Alter Rebbe's wife wanted to do the cooking to honor the guest. So the daughter said, no, but I do the cooking, so I want to have the schus, I want to have the mitzvah. Okay, so they went to the Alter Rebbe for like a din Torah, and he paskin, and to compromise that the mother should do the cooking, but not put in the salt, and then the daughter will come put in the salt. Yeah, famous story. So what happened was, the wife, there was a few months before, so then it happened that the wife did the cooking, and she forgot that she wasn't supposed to put in salt, but she did put in salt, and then his daughter came and also put in salt, and it was not edible. And Alter Rebbe was sitting and gave his food to the guest, and he started to eat, and Alter Rebbe was eating, and his guest takes one day, tastes, and he puts it back on it. Suddenly the Alter Rebbe realizes his guest is not eating, so he says, why are you not eating? So he says, I'm sorry to be honest, but it's so salty, it's impossible. He had actually a reverse question, like, how are you eating? Like, yeah. So Alter Rebbe said that since I came from the Mizritcha Magid, I lost the sense of taste. I'm above that, right? And that's for a tzaddik, it's like the Alter Rebbe, I mean, it's like, and yet the Rebbe, when he was telling these stories, he would say that because by Hashgacha, everything Hashgacha Pratis, because the Hashgacha Pratis, we know the story, it means that some lesson there must be, even in that story, there must be some lesson, right? Now, obviously, it can't be to emulate the Alter Rebbe, which is not possible. But the Rebbe says, you learn from the Rebbe a certain thing. There could be moments in one's life where you're above what the thing tastes like, because you're not thinking about it. You're in a different world. You're living in a different world. I always say, I don't know if this is true. I think the example I always like to give for myself is like this. If you're in shul in the Illa, right? Now most shuls, I mean that many shuls, but especially in the Illa, but in the Illa is very serious time, right? And it's very intense, and chazan, and singing, and it's getting more and more intense until you get to the end of the Illa, Shema Yisrael. It's like everyone has his oirus, everyone's awakened by the Illa, right? I think. Imagine you're in the middle of the last Avinu Malkeinu, and you sing it, and everyone's screaming, and it's like unbelievable. Imagine someone taps you on the shoulder and said, how would you like your pizza tonight? So I'm sugar already. Now, in the middle of now, you think I'm worried about my pizza tonight? Maybe when after the shofars blow, maybe, but not. right now, like we're in a different world now, right? I think the point of Chassidus is to try and have moments where a little bit of that is during the year also, not just in Kippur. Not on that level, not in intensity in Kippur, but you know what I'm saying, where some things become more important than others. And Alter Rebbe's point here is that brings you the real simcha. Because when you don't understand the oneness of Hashem, which means the world and worldliness and materialism is important, you can't get simcha for something that's so transient, something that's so meaningless and so empty. But when you understand that all of a sudden you're with Hashem, you want part of the oneness of Hashem, that's the greatest simcha. And it's the purpose of the world, because that's real dir b'tachtonim. When your world becomes all about what is God. By the way, when we tell stories, you always tell extreme stories, because you want to know what it looks like in its purity. You know, so you can then understand how am I going to apply it to myself. And apply it to myself means growth, every year differently. Right? That's part of the whole process, always growing, always a bit more. Yeah? Now, let's just do a little bit of it. He says, it gives a mashal, he says. Imagine, he says. Right? He wants to make it real. He says like this. Hine, kamo gedoylo simchas hedyo to shval anoshim. How great is the simcha of a commoner, just a common person, a low life. Imagine a guy that is like not a macher at all. He's like the janitor in the street, right? Imagine if he comes close to the king and the king's like friendly to him all of a sudden. Imagine the simcha. Then he says more, another word. Actually, each word here that they explain is very. Not only that, hamis askein. Imagine that guy suddenly realizes that he's going to be sharing a room with the king for a while. Me, like that. But not just that, he says, V'dor itzai. Not just he's sharing a room with you, but he's living with you. He's moved in. Right? So he's moving in. And where did he move in? Not is inviting you to move into his palace, right? V'dor imay bebeisa is living with you in your house, which is the essence of dir b'tachtonim. Dir b'tachtonim means feeling Hashem in this world. That's why it's going to be so difficult, because if it was easy to understand, it wouldn't be tachtonim. The whole point of creation is to reveal Hashem at the lowest level. That's why we don't have a consciousness. That's why we see the world's independent thing. That's why Hashem is completely hidden. And that's why then we have to learn Tanya and understand the oneness of Hashem, and understand that we are mamash of Hashem and have the most tremendous simcha. Right? Yeah, so that's correct. Not only that, we will feel pain for the Shekhinah even when we're in the process of tshuva. One of the ways to do tshuva is to feel the pain of Hashem, because we did an avera, because we schlepped him into our shmutz. But that's something that Rebbe says before, that we're only supposed to do certain times, so that we should be aware of it, because Hashem gives us a chance. He designed us that way to fail. So we have to have that reflection once in a while and feel the pain, in order that we should understand that Hashem is still accepting us, and He still wants us, He still loves us, and He's still with us. He just wants you to improve a little bit. Okay, so you're right, that is true. But that's not a pain you're supposed to feel, because the main thing is serve Hashem with simcha. And the simcha is, I know with all the thing, with all the pain, we are Hashem's with us.
So he's big enough to shoulder the darkness.
Sorry?
He's big enough to shoulder the darkness.
Correct. But He doesn't want you to. Our job is to make life. That's why sometimes we have to look at it. No, He is in pain. It's true. Shekhinah has been golus with us. Yeah.
He chose it.
Sorry?
He chose it.
Yeah, but He chose us and He gave us a choice.
I never get that perspective. I'm like, he wanted this.
What did He want?
He wanted all of it. He wanted all the darkness.
No, but He wanted us to make a choice to look through the darkness. That's the point.
He decided it would be worth it.
Yeah? Okay, so that's right.
It's not my problem.
No, it is our problem. No.
I know it's my problem, but it's all for him. Like,
No, but that's the word. No. See, that's the word. I know. That's something people always ask. But it's actually not like that. And this is really the point of this parak. Because it's for us also. Because that's why he's talking about the simcha.
we're like a byproduct. Like we're like, okay,
No, we're actually part of the process. We're part of Him. That's the word. We're not something separate to the Eibishter. In other words, the Eibishter telling the janitor, I can't be separate to you because I created you, and you're part of me. But I also it's very complicated, because I also hid from you, and I also gave you free choice, so you can do the wrong thing. But I'm always there to welcome you back. That's why it's not about. I mean, we do sound the word angry sometimes, but it's not about being angry. Hashem always gives us the point of tshuva. That's the whole idea of tshuva. And tshuva is for us, it's not only for Hashem. The biggest, that's what I'm saying, as we're saying here, the biggest simcha comes when we understand the. Later on, he'll make it even a deeper simcha, but.
If we don't even exist, how is it for us?
That's the point. We do exist, but it exists as part of Hashem. That's what I'm saying. Hashem created us with the tzimtzum. That tzimtzum is also also created by Hashem. And us, as we exist, seemingly independently, with all the tzimtzum and everything, is really all part of His oneness. We're not going to stop feeling. We're not going to stop existing. That's the point. We're not dying here. We're continuing to live. Right? There's a part of Tanya before we talked about Mesiras Nefesh, when that's needed. He talked about more Mesiras Nefesh, where you see how we really are part of Hashem, where a person will rather give up his life rather than serve a desire, right? But that's not what's expected of us. We're not supposed to, right? We'll do it next week. I'll tell you about it, because next week actually will be the Shir before Gimel Tammuz. Actually, it's very tied into what the last Maimer of the Rebbe of Atat Tzaveh, right? About having Mesiras Nefesh in this world, to live with Mesiras Nefesh, not to die with Mesiras Nefesh. And as we are living with Mesiras Nefesh, living with that bittul will bring us the ultimate simcha. If we understand it properly, if we think about it properly and internalize it properly, right? Yeah, you know what, I'm going to stop here. I'm not going to go into the next section, because I thought we'd do 2 sections today, but I'm not going to do it, because otherwise we won't be able to finish it properly. We'll come back, we'll talk about it again. This needs a lot of, this is the crux of all of it. But Taka needs a lot of understanding. Needs a lot of understanding. This is the point. That's why I started the paragraph by saying, when you really think about it deeply. Because our default position is different. We're born into a world. We're born into a world, right? Where the world is completely the opposite of what it's saying here. And that's our training, that's our default. Every part of the world is exactly the opposite of this. Until you learn about it, until you appreciate it, until you understand it. I'm reading a book now, it's worth getting. It's actually an ArtScroll book. It's a fascinating book, although some parts are very, very painful. There was a Rebbetzin we always knew her, I actually didn't know her personally, but she was always known, she came from Russia, she was always known as Rebbetzin Ushpal, because her last husband was Rabbi Ushpal, was a big Rav in Bar Park, Chassid of the Rebbe, but she was also known that this was a third marriage. Why was it a third marriage? She came from Russia, she grew up in Russia. You read this book, you get a sense of how hard it was to be a Frum Jew, and how the Hasidim who really knew this and internalized this, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. The Emunah, the Mesiras Nefesh, right? We'll talk about it next week. The point, and it's worth reading the book to understand how bittul really looks like. Even though that's not the bittul that's expected from us. Because the Rebbe explains, because I'm just saying, in continuation of your question of how to live like that, right? The amount of time this girl, from a young girl, had to risk her life, almost died, just to keep a mitzvah is unbelievable. Just to keep Shabbos was unbelievable. What she gave up to be a Yid, it was so easy to give it up. Because the communists were really trying their hardest to stamp it out. And the chinuch she got from her father, and there were people who didn't survive. Right? Anyway, she married someone very young in Russia, and then he died in the army, in the Second World War. He was schlepped to the army against his will, and he was shot there, whatever, and then she married someone else, and then when she came to America, eventually he died, and then she married the third one. The Rebbe insisted that she shouldn't marry a third time, and she said she'll be very happy, and at the end it was very good for her. After the second time, she says, I'm not doing this again. But what a spunky lady, what a person, always, always, but we have the whole book goes but we have a father, the Eibishter. His father, the Eibishter with us, the Eibishter. She had tremendous miracles also. It's the most incredible. I forgot what it's called, I'll have to bring it next week. Huh?
Has she passed or she's still?
Yeah, no, she passed away. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
So we use those things to inspire?
No, so the Rebbe has a thing. Maybe we'll explain next week, because for Gimel Tammuz will come very nice into this. Because the Rebbe's last Maimer really talks about what Mesiras Nefesh looks like, and why Mesiras Nefesh comes, And it's also got a little bit to do with the emunah v'yid that it just can't be. Once you understand the truth, it can't be anything different. So it's not a choice. Of course, Shabbos has to be kept. What do you mean? Of course, kashrus has to be eaten, right? My life without it is, otherwise, my life without it is nothing. It's no life without Torah mitzvahs, right? The Rebbe's thing is that, and there's a whole thing how that works with the different levels of the neshama, which I'll try and explain next week maybe, but that we have to live with the same Mesiris Nefesh when we don't need that Mesiris Nefesh. When we don't need it. In other words, like this: a Yid in Russia was said, I'll die rather than give up Shabbos, right? We don't have to do that, but we have to sometimes say, I need to get out of bed to go to a shir, or I'm not in the mood today, but I'm going to do it anyways, right? And in a way, that's harder of a serious nefesh because we don't have that adrenaline, right?
So you don't know exactly what you should be doing. Like with that, like there's no other option. Like with this, it's like, should I be working on this or should I be working on this?
Okay, it doesn't matter. I mean, okay, well, there are guidelines, but I mean, even if it's something it's a good thing to do, like person knows he's in davening, he shouldn't talk in davening, right? That's right. Pretty obvious. That's pretty clear. But it's not seen as important, maybe, and it's not this, not that, right? Things like that. Even simple halacha sometimes, right? It's not the same threat. No one's holding a gun to our head and saying like that. So that's okay. So that's what we have to work with. That's what we need to. That's why in the Maimon says you first have to understand how Mesiris Nefesh works in its purity. When you actually mamash have to give your life for it, right? Or be ready to give your life for it. And then you can apply it also to. Anyway, we'll develop it more next week. It's very, very important, this stuff. We'll develop it more next week in Mr. Shem.